All right, all right. God bless you all on tonight. We're grateful for this third part of the PK conversation, and I'm grateful to have my cousin once again be a part of this. He was out of pocket last week, much deserved. That's all I would say. Much deserved out of pocket, but I'm glad that he is here tonight to be a part of this third part of our PK conversation. So, cousin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, reintroduce myself. My name's Austin Turner. I'm currently live in Oklahoma. I mean, excuse me, Raleigh, North Carolina. Happily married, beautiful wife, Kanye, and daughter Zaria. And I'm happy to be here today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. And let me just say, opening this up, he's not trying to come back to Oklahoma. I'll just let y'all
Yeah,
know.
just a visit.
Y'all heard that right? Just a bit. He's not trying to come back to Oklahoma, but because I want to open this conversation up, with just your perspective on something that we've talked about. Growing up as a PK and growing up in a preacher's home, but also as we talk about, we grew up around not just legendary preachers, but we also grew up around going to church, but also conventions. This is where I really want to get to when we talked about how, going to the conventions, going to these districts, being involved in that. As a PK, what made you really enjoy those experiences?
Um, well, honestly, I wasn't a PK at those conventions. I was,
Okay,
but I wasn't. So,
right,
I was just one of the kids. There was so many kids there that you really didn't pinpoint, preacher's kids. But just, this is one thing I touched on in the podcast I did with my mom.
mm,
Just I just had fun, and it
right,
was just in definitely godly environments, and kids and activities just geared directly towards Christ, and and having
right,
fun with it in ways that you may not have got at your home church.
right,
And then also, really making friends with, people that were in your district, and,
right,
certain activities you may have to practice for, like we had step shows and things of that nature. Those are things I was excited for. And you got to meet all the people in your district, and those became like, your other friends. And it was just almost like a big old family reunion a lot of
right.
times. After you win a couple years, it was good to see these people. And I grew up with these people. But I love conventions, man. That was like the highlight of my summer a lot of times.
Right.
Just going there and all the activities, and it's something that I feel like is missing, for my
Right.
daughter and her, enjoyment, and just how much fun I had there. And I just feel like she's missing out sometimes. So
So, and then talk to us then about that struggle, raising your daughter as it pertains to how you see church now compared to how church was, at her age and church growing up. And like we talked about, even when engaging in young adults as well. Just talk to us about those struggles of where we were, and then compare it to what today looks like.
um, I would say there's just not as much enthusiasm or excitement about it.
Right.
I mean, it's still there, and I don't want to knock it or anything like that. It's just, and I'm gonna be honest with you, and this conversation I've had with you, and
Right.
sometimes, and this is felt all the way across in the East Coast here. I don't think the enthusiasm is just as there from the young adults down to the children as it was, pertaining to when I grew up. And just to see all the activities that were around for us, just simple things, man. I don't even see, when's the last time you saw Easter speech, or when's
Right.
the last time the Easter plays and things of that nature still happen. But um, just what I want to say, growing up, that was a big part of my life. It was half of my life, if you guess what I'm saying. So it was school, and then it was
Right.
church and
Right.
activities around church. So being, seeing it now, and my daughter now, maybe it feels like it's, 15-20% of
Right.
it. And then especially this last year of COVID, and her only access is, maybe Sunday school
Right.
sessions, or Wednesday night sessions, which we don't really have for the kids, but it's really just the Sunday school factor. And that's all the access she really has outside of things we may provide for her, ourselves. So I think that's really took a toll on just their, I guess them growing up in that year of Christ activities that she would have had if she was actually going to church.
So as you are, now a PK, and we talked about, transitioning to Kansas City. We talked about that last week. But when you are growing up as a PK, and you're seeing Uncle Rick elevate, and then you're also seeing your stepfather doing the things that they're doing. Did it ever come across to you that burden or that desire to preach? And and I'm asking this question. I already see the smirk on your face because sometimes, no, but we be honest. Sometimes in growing up in church, that, and from what I've heard of from other PK, sometimes that members may come to that particular child and say, "Oh, you're destined to preach. You're gonna preach. You're gonna preach just like your father. You're gonna be just like your father." And then for some that's happened, but everybody, that's not their testimony. So when you were growing up, did you ever have those comments, those words, and how did you deal with that?
I got it all the time.
Right.
You know, I didn't really. It was just more so something just people told me all the time. And, I took it just the same as somebody told me that I look like my daddy. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
In terms of that, I wouldn't say that it ever bothered me per se. No one ever pushed me to be like, uh, that you have to do certain things and things of that nature. I would say on the flip side of that, there was something inside of me that there was some resentment behind ever being a preacher.
Okay.
Not to say, and even to this day, I'll say, if I got the calling, I wouldn't fight it, but I'm not searching for it. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
It's just as being as a preacher's, kid and seeing, the ups and downs of, what your father, even the pastor's wife, and seeing the stress that I put, and just comparing that to even, the stress that my wife would have to go through of situations of me constantly being called away, and also the stress of her having to present, a certain image at all times and things of that nature. As a child, like I said, it didn't really bother me, but like I said, I ran away from it because I didn't really want that life for myself, seeing it there. And then, not even just my father, but my stepfather, and also other preachers that I may have seen that, poured their entire life into that, and, may have missed out on some life opportunities and things of that nature, or not even saying miss out, because I don't want to say that you're missing out on life, but your calling is to serve, and that's your number one goal, is to serve. And I feel like I can serve whatever in other capacities.
Right.
So I don't feel like I've never felt like it's a requirement. I always
Mhm.
felt like it's something that if it came upon me, I wouldn't fight. Like I said before, but I'm not searching for that call right now.
But you hit on something that's very important that I don't think a lot of people maybe talk about when it deals with PKs, and that is that feeling of resentment. And I think
Mhm.
that's very important. I think a lot of PKs need to hear. I mean, a lot of people need to hear and understand when you're talking about resentment. So give us some insight of how you felt, the type of resentment that you felt.
Like I said, it's just more so like it just, and I don't like comparing this word or using this word, but the
Right.
burden that it carries. You get what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Hmm.
I don't want to feel like serving the Lord is a burden, but it's something that I've seen my dad struggle with my entire life, and even now, pertaining to just his ability to be able to be flexible.
Right.
Because a lot of pastors, and the only thing I can really go off of mostly is the two examples that I had closest to me, my father and my stepfather. But they keep the church close to them, and especially early on, they feel the need to really go out and uh, be there for every situation that may come up. So every funeral, every wedding, every sick person and things of that nature, they feel as if they need to be there for that. You do have associate ministers, but I feel like early on, and my father really getting his church when I was 10, 11, and him really, putting all his all into that from there. It was just a kind of an understanding that I knew that he may not be
Right.
there for certain things, which he was. My dad did the best job ever of never making me feel like that anything was more important than me. But
Right.
at the end of the day, in the back of my head, I knew that he had a bigger calling that was more important sometimes than some things that may have been me. And I just had resentment in terms of just um, the amount of responsibility it carried,
Mm-hmm.
and then also what was shown in reciprocation to him for all of that he had to sacrifice for sometimes. um that kind of built some resentment inside of me, and like I said, going through some divorces in church and things of that nature, it was just too much to have a spotlight on me
Right.
my entire life. You get what I'm saying? So to have the spotlight as a child and then go directly into being a preacher, I just feel like I needed a break for a while. That's why I said if it calls me, I'll answer.
Now, I always joke with Austin, say, we gonna bring him to Oklahoma to preach one day. He'll just like, that's not me, because he'll say that right there. But you hit on something else that's very important that I believe church members need to understand about PKs, and we had this conversation a couple weeks ago. Is that when you see your dad giving his all, when you were growing up and saw Uncle Rick giving his all, being here, being there, but then you also then come to find out, you see how the members treat him in return, or the members may not show that appreciation in return. How did that feel as a PK? Because you're like, this is my father, because it's your father, but you see the frustration, you see the hurt, you see the agony, the disappointment, because he's doing what he's called to do and being there for people, but that appreciation is not being reciprocated to him. So how did that make you feel growing up?
Um, it really was. Like I said, everything kind of went over my head to a certain age
Right.
when I started noticing things. And when I said I started noticing things more so when like family issues started coming up and things of that nature. And it wasn't even the fact of appreciation, I would say. It's just the expectation of perfection. You get
Right.
what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that was always the number one factor that drove me to feeling as though they don't appreciate what he's doing um, in a way that he, like my father always, me and my stepfather, both of them, always preaching a way to saying, I'm just the messenger. I'm not perfect. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
I always preface that don't worship me, worship God. You get what I'm saying? I'm just
Mm-hmm.
here to pass the message down. And sometimes I don't feel like that was really understood or uh, and so they held him at a standard that's really not fair sometimes. You get what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Right.
Because I don't feel like when I watch my dad preach, I don't feel like it's him pointing at me. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's God talking through him
Right.
to relay the messages I need to hear. And it's difficult for some people to separate the two.
Right. and so I think that's important, as you're talking about the fact that it's God speaking through. It's not like, as preachers, as preaching, it's not like we're just pointing you, tell you this, what this, this and that, but it's what the Lord is speaking to us to give to the congregation. And so when you do that, and then sometimes you see the backlash, you see the vitriol, if if you will, and it does, in a way, I believe, as a PK, make you feel a certain kind of way. And so when you felt that kind of way, what were keys or tools that you necessarily use to, in a sense, kind of block it out and not allow it to keep you away from church?
Well, for me, it was kind of a perfect storm of things, and I'm saying this in a context of um, I got to separate myself. So half of my, from a certain point, I spent time at two different churches.
Right.
So different lives, if you get what I'm saying. So
Right.
it was two different expectations. It was two different. So, some weeks I could relax, some weeks I couldn't, and things of that nature. So I took that, and, and this is something I spoke about in the last podcast we had, that, there's nobody I really spoke to about. There was no one to confide in,
Right.
with this information, because, there was nobody I felt like was going through the same type of situation I was. And then, of course, my sibling, my sister, she's 7 years younger than me, so our conversations wouldn't have been the same at the time. But it was more so, it was a perfect storm of me being able to separate my time between two different congregations,
Mm-hmm.
and really just being able to go to church and not have any expectations upon me. That really actually really helped me the most, to be honest with you. And then really just confiding in, my church friends at the time, not confiding in telling them information, but they made me feel regular.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my, my friends and things of that nature, they made me feel, they never went into, certain questions to make me feel uncomfortable and things of that nature. I always felt at home and safe, on
Right.
both sides of the fence with my friends there. So that's really what I confided in, and I wish I really would have found a spiritual tool at that age, but at that
Mm-hmm.
age, you really don't know how to.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody really supplying this type of, ministry. Well, at the time, there may be now, to kids going through certain things in the church, especially, maybe pastors' kids, but even anyone going through a divorce or anything, and having a spotlight, and them knowing within the church just how to deal with it as a child. So um, I would say just the balance of two congregations, and just my friends is really what helped me get through it at the time.
So and you're going through these transitions, and you hit on something. You're talking about that spotlight, talking about being in that spotlight. So when you're talking about being in that spotlight, and you say, even though your church friends, were there, but and this is just me from the outside, I would think, and I know, something we talk about, that's just stay between us, but I would think, and you know that there's some things that even with church friends, they get to a certain place, but they don't get all the way there. You may not let them all the way in. You know what I'm saying? So when you're going through this, how did you, with some feelings, some emotions that are just there, and you want to get them out, but you necessarily can't. What were those intense moments like?
Um, hmm. Okay, so there was always the PK facade that I had to put up in terms of
Right.
not really divulging any private information, just for the image of, for the sake of my parents. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but all the intense moments that I had were mostly individual tense moments, and um, honestly, I learned at a young age just to kind of, I'm the same way now. Like, I just kind of deal with things internally, and I learned that, you know, I learned at that age kind of not to take things as serious as I need to,
Right.
as it may be at the time, and to really be, it caused a nonchalant attitude about myself that I had to get
Mm-hmm.
past at a certain point in time. There was a lot of things now that I had to get out of my system, and that even I had to go and do counseling now, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, in terms of just really being able to release
Right.
that I've been holding for, what, at the time, 27, 28
Right.
years.
Right.
So, you know, it was really me just internally just balling it up and putting it into other things. So let me think. At the time, what I was doing, that was, sports, basketball, things of that nature. Really trying to find activities to kind of just take my mind off certain things. I think, at the time, I may have put it into, I honestly don't know, man. Like, I think I just dealt with it internally, and
Right.
it's really hard for me to really express myself
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Right.
Because I just internally just kind of locked up, and just, I had to.
Right.
put on the facade for church or whoever, whatever, just to keep the name. I
Right.
never wanted to, like, my goal was never to bring any negativity to my parents whatsoever.
Right.
Because
Right.
I just felt like it wasn't fair to them,
Right.
because they worked too hard to get in the situations that they are now. So I really
Right.
took that serious, and that's why I just kind of internally dealt with stuff.
And I think what you're hitting on is very important because people don't realize, people, our church members, when talking to PKs, they don't realize what some PKs deal with internally already, whether it may be trust issues, whether they may be emotional issues, mental issues. And then you have church members who may say little comments or say snarkling things, but they already don't understand what you're dealing with already on the inside. That's a struggle for you, and you're bottling this up, and then you have this on top of that.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I wouldn't say that everybody was kind of negative or anything like that. It was more so some people were just indifferent with comments and things that they said, that, it's kind of made a mental note at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really bother me per se. Well, when it was directed towards me, I think the things that used to bother me the most was things that were directed to my younger sister at the time.
Right.
Not towards her, but situations that had put her in that she may not have known that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But me, being at the age now that I could see that that wasn't, right in terms of certain things, that's the kind of things that really bothered me. And that's kind of stuff that put a taste in my mouth, that really gave me some negativity for a while. Not away from the church, but just
Right.
kind of go sit back and watch versus be
Right.
involved with certain things. And then it kind of, and I don't want to divulge into, like, my
Right.
siblings or anything, but it kind of makes me understand, uh, my sister in comparison to me and
Right.
how we approach church now, just because our experiences were the same, but we reacted to them differently.
Right.
So,
And that's important because that's where I also want to get to is that talk to us about sibling relationships as PKs, because I think that's very important, because I think you just hit on something. Like I said, we talked about this as well last week, but sibling relationships as it relates to PKs, because how one sibling looks at a situation, another sibling can look at it differently. But the fact is, you all are still growing up together. You're living this together. So, how talk to us about the importance of the PK relationship, and how siblings had to deal with being hurt by members at the church.
so being the fact that my sister is so far, like 7 years, her understanding of certain things was different than mine. My number one goal is to protect my sister from anything that may happen, and because what may not hurt my feelings may hurt
Absolutely.
hers, indirectly. So that's the thing that bothered me the most. Now, I wouldn't say our relationship was our bond was strong when it came to dealing with those things, because we were just so far apart.
Right.
But there's bonds that I took from when I was introduced to my new step siblings that formed a bond, and our understanding of members forming opinions based on things that may not have anything to do with them. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
And going and um, acting a certain way towards them or to our parents, based on information that really shouldn't pertain to them. So I think it's really important. So, like, I'm gonna tell you this: on my step sibling side, their bond when they went through this situation on their side is like this. Now, I crawled in between that, and I came in a little bit late because I didn't grow up with them, but I
Right.
did. Maybe middle school and up, we became close. But that's one thing that I've seen. Their structure is something that I actually really revere, because their bond, and I think them
Mm-hmm.
going through that made them even closer, because it's a lot of them, and they're really close, and I think that's one of the things that probably strengthened their bond top to bottom. And I think it's really important to have someone to rely on and to confide in because they're going through the exact same situation that you are. And I
Right.
think that may have changed my experience completely if I would have had, a sibling 2 years younger than me, or a year younger than me, or a year older
Mhm.
than me,
Absolutely.
to really rely on and have the conversations, because we would have had those conversations. So I think that that probably would have been important. Like your wife probably had, someone to lean
Right.
on with that, and that's probably made her experience. Because I couldn't, I would almost say like I went about it as a only child, just because
Right.
I was the only one at that age, just kind of dealing with it myself. So I think it definitely makes sibling bonds stronger. It also gives you a varying opinion that you may not have. So you understand, for me, and not talking about it with people, I only had one opinion and only one point of view to view it as.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So certain things that I may have been more open to listening to, I may have got that perspective at that point, not 10, 15 years later. You
Right.
get what I'm saying? So I think it's very important. I think it definitely helps whatever PK goes through that, or whatever situation, or even their entire life, to make the situation better for them.
Right. So were you in a way, did you have those periods, those moments of just loneliness, of just kind of feeling like, you were just basically on an island by yourself while you were going through this, even though you, as you said, Addie was with you, but did you ever just feel like you were kind of on this island just by yourself, dealing with this by yourself, going through this by yourself? And as you talking about containing, how did you just feel like, I'm just like, I'm just barely making it some days. I'm just barely, you know.
Um, Mentally, I wouldn't say no. It never got to that point where I was just that bad. And like I said, because internally, I just learned to. You know what? Here's the thing. If And this was always compared it to, if my dad wasn't falling out about whatever, because I know whatever he was going through, or whatever he had on his plate, or whatever, if he wasn't expressing it to me,
Right.
then what reason do I have to really, fall out about something? If my mom, you know, didn't bring that to me, or, even my stepdad at some points didn't bring that to me. Um, Stepmom, I felt like it always made me feel like, what do I have to complain about?
Mm,
You get what I'm saying?
right.
Not that it wasn't affecting me or whatever, but I always compared it on a level of, their burden is more than mine,
Mm,
and they continue to walk the path.
wow.
So why should I? This is me thinking 10, 11. That why should I, let it bother me to that point of you know being paralyzed mentally to whatever words may come across,
Right.
to me. So that's always how I handle things. And I had, model parents of just showing how to deal with things and not really passing on to their children, or even not, or even just, going to church every day with a smile on your face, or even going to work, everything with a smile on your face, and not really letting things that affect you, that aren't hurting you physically,
Mm,
um, and so that I kind of took that and ran with that, probably from, once I understood the concept, um, and just kind of lived that for, my whole life.
wow. I think you hit on something very important that I think will help out a lot of PKs. Clearly, it helped you, and I think it'll help a lot of other PKs. Is, as you were just talking about, seeing those examples, those godly examples, I think is very, very important. And just from your experience, as you said, seeing the godly examples from Uncle Rick, Miss Janice, your stepmom, stepdad, just seeing those examples, because as you see, I mean, this is real life. And I believe that a lot of times members in the church don't really understand sometimes what the pastor goes through. First, just the pastor himself or herself, and then now you have the children who are dealing with this, and sometimes the parents will do their best to shield their children from, but sometimes the children see what they're dealing with. They see, they hear the phone ringing, they see they see the tears, they see these things, and so it gives off this perception where it's like, oh well, because he's driving a nice car, because they have these things, that everything is good. But that can be a misconception, because you don't go home with them. You
Right.
don't see that part. And so I think that sometimes there's been a misconception of PKs, just from the standpoint of basically saying like they got it all together.
Right. Well, I think it goes both ways, and I think I spoke about this last time, but I think there always needs to be a pulse check, and then some sense of transparency,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a family in a pastor's family,
Right.
and really to address things that may be happening and feelings that may be happening. And I think there's always a pulse check that parents may need to do with their kids, with pastors' kids, to just kind of, how are you doing with, um, your day to day, just going to church, or just, presenting that image that you need to have. Do you feel or do you always feel comfortable with it? Is there anything that you feel, and it's not even like anything to be negative, just more so just to, see where they're at mentally, because you never know. And I'm not even talking about the serious situation. I'm just talking about just every day, because even some people, may not have it in them to be that every day, and that's why, they may release at school, or they may
Mm-hmm.
leave and release, and things of that nature. And these are things that could have been solved just by a few conversations,
Mm.
early on,
Right.
just to get a pulse check. And um, I think sometimes, I don't think my father really shared information with us in terms of how he was feeling or how he was dealing with certain things with the church or anything like that. But I think a sense of transparency would be good, just for you to have that conversation, and to know that it's okay to feel a certain type of way,
Mm-hmm.
or if there's something that needs to be addressed, that it gets addressed, versus just kind of, knowing they're always going to be okay. You get what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
So I just think those, some simple conversations may have changed my output, my sister's output, or outlook, excuse me, in terms of, certain things, or day-to-day things. And I also want to throw a disclaimer. It's not like this was all negative. We I enjoyed being a PK, but the times, that there was negativity, I think simple conversations may have helped. And then just
Mm-hmm.
even regular times, I mean, simple conversations with them, like, hey, are you okay? How are you feeling? Or, because you'll have conversations about school, you have conversations about everything else, but simple church conversations don't always happen. And just to see
Mm.
a child's, point of view of things that may be affecting them, that the parents may not have any idea whatsoever about. So.
Especially I believe when you're talking about the church, when you're talking about those normal conversations, I think that's very important. That's a very good point that you just made, talking about those conversations. And because, I mean, if we're honest, there are PKs who will go to church, but sometimes they don't want to be involved. They don't want to be involved in any type of ministries. And then, it could be something that may have happened that they've never spoken about. And it's not that they don't want to speak about it. As you said, that conversation may never have come up. And so if the conversation doesn't come up, then nobody knows. And then they're just basically saying, well, go do this, go do that. But they're doing it, but then they may have a resentful spirit.
Well, it's not even that, man. Like I said, I wouldn't even say just PKs, but this conversation in general just needs to
Right.
happen. I'm gonna tell you why, because you can see the runs from people our age and their engagement in church now.
Right.
And I think some of those conversations that may have of acceptance, or
Mm-hmm.
even anything, if those simple conversations would have happened, you know, 12, 11, 12,
Right.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, even 18, their outlook now would be more so of um, of wanting to go and have those conversations now, versus just ignoring it and not even going at all. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So versus thinking, because I feel like there's a whole group of our generation, and especially the generation below us, that
Yeah.
feels neglected
Right.
because those conversations may not have happened when we were young, and just conversations of acceptance. And even if it's not acceptance, it's more so there's open dialogue to
Absolutely.
understand the differences that we may have.
Hmm.
So I think that's definitely something that is important, and that needs to be that needs to happen now. And would it did me a whole lot of good? Probably did with my sister a whole lot of good, my step siblings a whole lot of good, and even our parents a whole lot of good, just to understand our psyche at the time, and maybe why we are the way we are now.
Hmm. I I like that we need to have a conversation, because I believe, as you said, not just PKs in general, that we do need to have more conversations, more dialogue about these things, because people will harbor these feelings in, and then, as you say, they may resent the church, they may resent their parents, may resent other siblings. We don't know, but these conversations are very important that need to happen. And so when we talk about these conversations, when we talk about these talks, what is it that you, and let me ask this question, man, as you've looked at this now as a husband and as a father, what are keys then to in a way to what are some keys that you've used now to make sure that your family is good, that your family is communicating from what you learned growing up?
So like with my daughter now, I don't tend to stop. So okay, here's what happened most of the time. Growing up, thinking about it this way: how was children's church, right? You,
Right.
you say good, right?
Mm.
What did you learn? And then that's the end of the conversation, right? Most of the time,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So no, just simple conversations, just every once in a while, just to get a pulse of friends, things of that nature. Is there anything that's making you feel uncomfortable, or anything you don't understand?
Right,
You know, and of course, she may not share everything with me, but I want her to know that's an open door
right,
to those things. Just if there's a problem, or there's anything you don't feel uncomfortable, that you feel comfortable with, or even expressing yourself. If there's disagreements in the way you express yourself, or things you see in the world that you may compare to the church, I want to have those conversations. I want to be able to have those conversations with her young. I mean, she's 12 now, so she's getting to the age where she could express herself more when it comes to stuff like that. But I just wanted to be that type of transparency and comparison, that she can always go there, or to me, which is an extension of her parents, but of the church. I'm not a pastor, but an extension of the church, because I make her go, you know. So just so that she can have those conversations, and then I can give her, biblical, perspective of why there's things the way they are now, and then even having dialogues, because she may have different experiences than I had when I was a child,
right.
or that I'm having now. So just to understand and bridge the gap. That's my biggest thing, is bridging the gap, man. That's what I think was missing now. Just the gap is wide open, and we've had this conversation, and I just want to have that, to have an
Mhm.
extension for the future. And that's from PKs to whoever,
Right.
just to have this conversation. I think it's important. Um, and just having a dialogue with my wife as well, with the same things, real conversations that pertain to church and pertain to God, and our in the way we stand things, because we may have differences in understanding, and I think it's important to talk about it. So
Now, I agree with that as well. I'll say, when I was growing up, I did not like children's church. I didn't like it. I didn't like the church we went to. And it's funny, I started preaching at the same church, which is which is
I mean, that's how it happened.
which is funny. But I didn't like it. And what I didn't like is just the fact of that, they weren't, the kids weren't real welcoming. Some of the people weren't real welcoming. It wasn't, in other words, it wasn't Greater Mount Olive. And that
Did
was
you
what
did you ever have a chance to express that though?
that's where I'm getting
Okay,
to.
that's
So,
about it.
so it wasn't Greater Mount Olive, and and I would just say, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. But of course, my parents will still say, well, go, go. So I'm going. but I'm not happy. I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I don't want to be here. As I got older, I was able to express that to my mom and really tell her how I was feeling. But at the time, I mean, as a kid, being able to really express that wasn't really there, or being able to say it the way I wanted to say it. So it's like, I'm going here, but I don't really want to.
Right. And I think, see, that's the thing, man. I just think there's a generational divide in terms of us Black folks and being able to express ourselves in a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that in that conversation that you may have had, even if they were to ask the why of why you didn't want to go, because more so, we come from the generation, you're gonna do what I tell you to do, and that's it,
And
right?
that's how it was.
Which is fine, but like I said, sometimes I think, and that's the same type of, um, and like I said, there's a thing with me and going to counseling and things like that, and just how we dealt with our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We were taught to deal with our feelings in a way of just get over it type of thing.
Right.
You
Let
get
it
what I'm
go.
saying?
Let it go.
Versus being exactly, and versus really going out and being able to talk about our feelings and why we feel a certain type of way. Not right or wrong, but there might have been a situation like for you where you could express the why. Maybe then in turn they could go and address the why by talking to whoever they need to talk to. Not changing churches, but just making it as positive for you, because that may have been 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of better experiences for you that you may have missed out on. That
Right.
that luckily you turned into a preacher, but those young years could have affected you in a way to where you may not you could not be going to church right now just because of those experiences you had at that age. You know what I'm saying? I just think it's just the simple fact of dialogue and it happening, and it happening at a certain age. And not to say that kids should tell you what to do, but just listen to why. There's a why behind it, and to help them understand the why, and to address it, or even make them feel like you're addressing it, because even that may have changed your perception at the time too. So,
Well, right. And the only thing is, like with me, it's then like you tell your mom or your dad, they're gonna take care of it, but then let 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 one parent hear about it or who's over it, then they may tell their kids. The next thing you know, you got a whole nother problem. Somebody say, "Oh, you tell this, that, and the other," and then you got this other problem. So for me, it was kind of, and I'll be honest with you, growing up, at Pilgrim Rest, great. We had great pastor from C.W. Wallace, but the fact was, we tried to blend in, but it was still a lonely experience. It wasn't that embrace. It wasn't that really family atmosphere. It was more cliquish than anything else. And when you deal with those churches where it's cliquish, or just certain people get chances, certain people get opportunities, then you kind of you brush away, even though your parents want to still see you, serve. But at the same point, I think for us it would have been more healthier had we had, in a way, just kind of transitioned somewhere else when we were still in that kid phase, to where it was like we could really be somewhere where we really felt comfortable and felt welcomed.
well, no, I mean, I totally understand that, and the word "cliquish" is really something that resonates with me, just because, like I said, I had friends, but being a pastor's kid, this really goes into more so my middle school teenage years. It was
Mm-hmm.
cliquish in terms of I wasn't always involved in things
Mm-hmm.
because of the scared notion of my
Mm.
peers that I maybe couldn't do something, or maybe if something I may tell about something, or may or they may feel that, not even after even having a conversation with me, that I may be too good for certain things, or I always felt like sometimes I was out of certain conversations just because of those preconceived notions about me.
Right. Right.
And so that affected my experience as well. But who was I going to express that to?
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
Was I gonna tell my dad, hey, they're not, nah, I wasn't gonna do anything. That's why I can definitely understand if you said you didn't feel welcome or anything like that, because who do you really have that conversation with? I mean, you can say you don't want to go, but then, I mean, you can't really express those things because you feel like, just like you said, it's just going to be like a downhill effect in terms of people finding out about such and such, or you feeling this way, or you feeling that way, and then it makes the situation even worse for you, probably. So I
Right.
get what you're saying on that.
Now, one day I do remember my mom did. She did talk to Pastor Wallace about it, and I remember what she said, just saying, others had complained as well, and it helped to remove a certain person out of a certain position and things like that. But I think that's important as well, though, to have those conversations. And I mean, I if I was like that, being because without being a PK, when people just find out you're a Christian and find out you go to church in middle school and high school, they'll shun you or they'll talk about you. They'll say different things like that. They'll leave you out of some conversations if you don't do certain things, if you don't smoke, if you don't drink. They'll I had people joke about me because I was a virgin in high school. That's just what happened. But they'll leave you out of those conversations, and so. But then I think for me, after a while, it kind of developed where I'll be the same way, keep the stuff bottled in, kind of just to myself. And it was funny because I've had this conversation with my parents since then, my older sister. Also, they would say, well, we really didn't understand you. And it was like, well, I mean, some things about me just weren't going to be understood because I developed that attitude of basically.
Right. Well, I can tell you this. Me being a pastor's kid made me okay. So I'll speak for myself when I say this. It made me overcompensate trying to be cool outside of church.
Mm,
So because there was a notion of me being a pastor's kid and everybody knowing that, and then even on the other side, um, you know, being a pastor's or step pastor's kid, you get what I'm saying?
right,
It made me overcompensate that to show people I was cool, quote
right,
unquote, by acting a certain way. He wasn't even saying that I was doing certain things like, like drugs and things like that. But I used to try to overcompensate for being cool. And when I say that, it may have involved, like making fun of people or something like that. That things like that. I used to try to overcompensate to get away from those conversations or those expectations of people thinking I was too good or I was
right.
too, or that I was gonna raise my nose up at certain things and things
Right.
like that. So I feel like that is something that I definitely did when I was a kid, and that was a defense mechanism for me.
So
Um,
did you ever feel like you lost yourself, or did you ever have that feeling of where like you kind of just at one point just it came to your mind like what am I doing, or did you ever feel
uh,
uncomfortable with doing
yes,
that?
well, yes, I did, but I had to carry it. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? So when I had built it up so much that I just kind of had to live the lie, quote unquote, in terms of who I want to portray myself to be at the time. That I felt like the first time I actually, breathed a sigh of relief was kind of when I went to college because I started over.
Right.
I was nobody then. I was just Austin Turner from all the way from Kansas,
Right.
where people from North Carolina was looking at me like, "What?" I didn't even know y'all come from Kansas or something like that. So, but at that point, I just started over, and I was just Austin. There was nobody knew who I was, nobody knew who my father was, nobody knew who my parents were. My mother, my stepfather, and or anyone. And so at that point, I just kind of started over, and then finally, I could kind of just be myself, and I wasn't trying to prove anything to anybody else or anything in regards to that. So um, I would say it did consume me, and like I said, it was a defense mechanism that I had, and I started early. So from there, I just kind of had to carry that facade for that period of time. So it was kind of like I was living double lives in terms of like
Mm.
who I was at church and more so who I was, going to school and things of that nature, and just trying to be that cool guy, I guess, you know what I'm saying? Um, and it was something that, kind of, resonated and I fought with, and but, just like I said, you deal with it internally and, move on. Like I said, my goal was to make it to August of 2005 when I
Right.
went to college. Then nothing else mattered after that.
So, what would you tell younger PKs who may be feeling what you felt about the double life, about living one way here and one way there? What would be some things you would tell them about, being yourself and not trying to have that facade? What is some advice you would give them?
Um, I would try to tell people this is just not that serious, man. Like it really is not. It's not. Live and be who you are on both sides of the fence. If you feel like you're a humorous person in life, and then that you like express that, at church, or if you feel
Right.
like you're an outgoing person, express that in church. And I would even say, have those conversations with your parents if you feel like um, if there's anything that you feel like will shame, because like I said, there's things I could have did and ways I could have acted even when I was a kid that I probably thought my dad would have shunned on me about, or my mom would have shunned on me about. They probably wouldn't have blinked the eye. They would just see like he's expressed because it wasn't anything bad. But it's just almost to the point where you feel like you have to carry on this legacy or this facade of just being always, the best and not really, that uh, just to be yourself on both sides of the fence and just live the same life and express yourself in terms of telling your parents how you feel, or even find someone else that you can confide in, not to tell your personal information in terms of your family, but just your feelings internally. um, and don't be afraid to do that and to talk to someone about that, because you're not the only person going through that. um, that's definitely my recommendation. And lean on your siblings if you have them. Appreciate them. You tend to appreciate your siblings more as you get older. But definitely, as your kid, this is the time for you guys to really lean on each other and really help each other get through experiences, because those experiences may change, your sibling's life over time if you don't do it now.
Hmm.
And just really to really seize the moment and be yourself now versus thinking about it later, like me, versus me thinking that I need to go to college to be that. I could have did that now and it wouldn't hurt anybody. It wouldn't hurt anybody at all. My parent, like I said, I feel like I had higher expectations upon myself than my parents did. And I think it's not that my parents told me that I need to be this, and that. It's not like every day before church they told me, no, no, no. It's just I thought that that's what they wanted from me. And maybe if we had had those conversations, maybe it would have made me relax a little bit more,
Hmm.
you know, and things of that nature. And so I just think those conversations are great, for kids, and to really lay out their expectations. When you go to work, your best boss is the person that lays out their expectations.
Right.
You don't just go and do your work and hope that they're the best, or even sometimes, you may overdo things because you think that's the expectation. No, you lay out those expectations, and talk about things that naturally kids may go through, and really just get a pulse on where they're at and where they're going, and that it's not that serious. Like you do
Right.
not have to be all the time, you know,
Yeah.
and that's it is what it is. And now I get to see my dad more so. He's more relaxed, just even with church and things of that nature. And I think that if I may have saw that at a younger age, I may have really it may have changed my outlook on things and my expectations. And even my mom, same thing. Like I said, I have the best relationship I've had now with them than I ever had. But that's
Mhm.
because we have conversations now. So that's
So
that's
you,
probably the difference.
so you would definitely say communication is very key. It's very
Oh yeah,
important.
most
Very
definitely.
important. But when you talk about expectations, because I believe unfairly, church members sometimes put unfair expectations on PKs.
Hmm.
Because of where their blood comes from and things of that nature. But I think it's unfair. And I said it a couple weeks ago. I said that you have to get to know a person, even though this person is a PK. That doesn't mean that that's all they are. They have a
Right.
whole nother personality. They have a whole nother identity. But as you told us tonight about this unfair sometimes expectation, you never get to see this other side of this person. You never get to
Oh,
know this other side of this person because of that expectation.
almost definitely. Like I said, even certain people that see me that see me now as an adult will tell me that I didn't know you were like this. Not even saying it's a negative thing. It's just more so I didn't know you were this humorous. I didn't know that you was. It was just more so I felt like I just had to be. I was too scared to really dig into my personality to
Mm,
um, that something may come out.
right.
That's not the best look for my parents. That I just tend to mute everything at church for the most part. And I think that, like I said, I think that affected uh, me for a while. But
And also you hit on something else I think is very important when you talked about legacy.
mhm.
Because I think, like we've talked about before, and I think it's important, is that I think that's also a part of that unfair expectation is that we talk about legacy. So talk to us just about that, being a PK and and just about the 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 notion of a PK and a legacy and being told that you have to live up to this legacy.
um, it's not, you know what the crazy thing about that is, and I don't even think this is just a PK thing. I think this is anyone that has parents that have achieved or did
Right.
anything or in any type of spotlight. It's not even the pressure people put upon you; it's the pressure you put upon yourself, man. Because
Mm,
literally, because you feel like um, they've worked so hard and they did certain things and they've been in the public eye and things of that nature that you have to, if anything, achieve a portion of what they did. This is on both sides of the fence, man. I look back at both of my biological parents and really, um, I'm really at awe at the things they were able to achieve in their lifetimes and continue achieving now. That you probably talk to my wife now, she would think I'm like almost obsessed with um, meeting those expectations of that I placed upon myself just to do anything close to what they've done now. My dad. People used to think I was quiet, but my dad was probably the quietest person at the time. And just really knowing him and to see how he is at home to how he is in the pulpit and just the way people revere him and respect him and the impact he has on people. Like man, like it almost it's immense pressure that some people I can understand why people run away from it because it's
mm-hmm,
almost too much. Just to see that every day and even for people to look at you and be like you fell off the tree, so you should have
mm-hmm.
something there, to have the same type of impact, not if more. So I think it's twofold in terms of of course, you putting pressure on yourself, and then other people looking at you, thinking that you always should have the straight A's. You always should have, you should be married at a certain age. You should have kids at a certain age. Everything should go in order. Where you work at, you get what I'm saying? Those type of things, man. Listen, so like it's just like even the thing to where I even want to carry that now in terms of just being able to go home and know that I'm doing well and say that I have a certain job or things of that nature, just to hold up my parents' legacy to
Mm-hmm.
other people. You get what I'm
Right.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and even, just being, and that used to be my drive. Now, I'll have an honest moment here. So I had a personal drive to go to church in college somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also the half of what if people know or find out that I'm not going to church here in
Right.
college, and how would that affect
Right.
My father, this is halfway across the country. I'm worried
Wow.
about this.
Wow.
It had an impact on me and why I did certain things that I did. Now, of course, I went and I enjoyed myself. I've been going to the same church ever since college.
Mm-hmm.
But it started off that way, as in somehow, some way, I felt like it was going to get back. Not that I was scared of what my father was going to say. I just felt like how it was going to affect people talking around my father or my mother
Mm-hmm.
or my things of that nature. And it's a psyche thing, man. Psychologically, man. It just, I don't think it'll ever leave me
Mm-hmm.
in terms of wanting to, never scar my parents' legacy or anything like that.
Right. Wow. That's really heavy. Hey, seriously, that's really heavy, and I know if anybody's gonna be transparent about and honest, I know you are. So that's very heavy. That's very telling. And cause I know I won't keep you much longer because I know you been off work and stuff, so I can keep you much longer. But I do have a fun question, and this is
Sure.
just one that I think you'll enjoy. Knowing then what you know now, if you could just talk to some of the senior saints or some of the members who passed on, um and could just have a conversation with them about you as a PK, and even with about others as a PK, what is something that you would tell them about you that they didn't know? Just knowing then, if you could just wake them up and have a conversation, even though they may have had their own misconception, they may have had their own thoughts, but what is something or even a couple of things that you would tell them now, if you could have a chance to have a conversation with them?
Just about myself,
Mm-hmm.
or no, it would just be more so, man. Listen, dude, like it it would just be more of my personality. That's
Right.
really what. And this is and this is honestly something that bothers me. I told my dad this the other day. I wish I could have had conversations with my grandmother as an adult.
Mm.
Because imagine it, like, so the relationships I have with my parents now, it's so much better because we have conversations versus being directed to do things, that it just makes it so much better. Like, I just wish, because there was certain senior saints and things that said certain things that were funny to me, and I just chuckled or I just laughed, things like that. But just to even have a conversation and just to gain the wisdom versus just saying yes, ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
no, sir, yes, sir, type of things, and just to really dig deep and get those life lessons. And that's something that I enjoy now, man. This is something I really miss that we don't have the in-person men's Bible study anymore, because I used to really lean on that type of stuff and have those conversations, and really have dialogue
Right.
between senior saints that I didn't have before. It was just more so, you saw them as, it's crazy I used to think like this. So you saw them as senior saints, perfect and everything, just the same way that people saw your daddy.
Right.
But when you went home, I see my daddy jumping up for the Cowboys, or laughing at us in rush hour or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Or things of that nature that we just had conversation and dialogue with, that, if I would have seen them in their natural element, maybe I could have had conversations, or maybe I could have learned something new from those senior saints. So that's the thing. It's nothing specific. I just want to express my personality and who I am now, and really see theirs from who they are than Deacon Smith or Deacon
Right.
Jones, that who did communion, or who told us to stop running down the hallway and stuff like that. But just to have those real conversations, and not even has to be serious, but just playful conversations, and even adult conversations that I would just love to have, and just to soak up their knowledge and their wisdom, and really just get to know them for who they really are, versus me looking up to them and just knowing them for handing me candy or something. So that's more my perspective of really just sponging up that energy, and just their natural beings that I may not have got a chance to really see. Because I think about lots of the deacons or even church members that I just because we're getting older,
Yep.
and people I grew up seeing, they're passing on, and I go back and I look, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have really love to get to know that person,
Right.
or as an adult. And that's when I go back now, I'll go back and, I'll nudge, and, I'll try to, I want people to experience who I am now and who I
Right.
really am. And that's my goal. That's my number one goal now, to really, show people who I am, not just what I've achieved, but just who I am as a
Right.
person, for us to have, real conversations, or, just, because I want to have that impact on somebody, that, let them know that we're people too. And that's
Absolutely.
my goal, to show them that, I do have a personality. I'm just not Ricky Turner Jr., as people call me. So
Oh man, well, I appreciate you as always, cousin, for the conversation. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
just to take off that OSU wear, but we'll talk about that later.
You were doing great until you see this is orange at the bottom. Did you notice that?
It's all right, man. We'll see in the fall.
I did that just for you, just for you. But no, I thank you so much for spending time with us today, just to rap and talk. And I believe this is going to help somebody, and I believe it's going to bless somebody as well. So thank y'all for listening. Don't log off just yet. But thank y'all for listening. Like this, share this, and comment on this. And we thank you for being a part of this. And we look forward to the next time. So God bless.